but that's where we'll land. We're continuing. We have 2 more weeks left after this week, so next 2 weeks I'm going to be summarizing some chapters of the book we've been working through, Steve Cuss's Managing Leadership Anxiety. We're kind of trying to generalize that so it's not just applying to leadership, but just to people in general as Christians. So that chapter 3 of the book is called Sources of Internal Anxiety. I am going to reframe that as signs and sources of internal anxiety. So to be more specific, signs of anxiety that we'll be discussing tonight are when you are internally anxious, regardless of external stimuli. These are signs that manifest from that anxiety into your body. So that's signs of anxiety. We'll talk about those. Then sources. So what are some internal triggers, mainly in your thought life, that can cause those signs of anxiety to manifest? I'm putting an emphasis on internal anxiety because next week we'll look at external things that cause anxiety. We're looking more at things that arise from the inside tonight. So Cuss starts the chapter by telling us the signs that we are anxious. These are good to remember here on the board. They are a spinning mind, a racing heart, and a tightening body. I've mentioned this before. Learning this was a big help to me. It will be different for every person when we work through them. So the spinning mind, that's pretty self-evident. When your mind starts whirling around like a tornado, can't think straight. We use phrases like that, I can't think straight. That's a sign that anxiety has taken control of you. The same thing goes for a racing heart. Obviously, there are external stimuli that can make our hearts race for good reason, like such as yesterday when we were driving back from Presbytery and a truck tried to run us off the road. If that makes your heart race, that can be verified, right? Hopefully unintentionally. But regardless, of course your heart's going to race if you have an external stimuli, but what if you're just sitting around your house and all of a sudden your heart's racing and nothing externally has happened to make it happen? Well, it means inside your heart, a truck has just tried to run you off the road. Inside your soul, you've got something going on internally that you're reacting to as if you're in fight or flight, even if you may just be sitting on your couch doing nothing. So a spinning mind, racing heart, and then the third one is a tightening body. Cuss says tightening gut. And I do think anxiety manifests for some people that way. Your gut constricts, you feel uncomfortable in your stomach. I would, if I was describing it, somebody said tightening body, because when it happens for me, it's usually not my gut where I feel it, it's my shoulders. I literally can ask Amber, like, are my shoulders tight? Yes, they're tight. I thought so. I'm anxious and I need to deal with it. So it could be manifest somehow, whether it's your chest, your gut, your shoulders. A tightening body is a sign that you got something going on inside of you that needs to be dealt with. So for me, a spinning mind is probably the most common sign that I'm anxious, though occasionally I do experience the body tightening, as I mentioned, and less occasionally the racing heart. And for you, it may be the heart may be the main thing, and the body the second, and the mind the third. Getting to know which is which for you is a good sign that your body is telling you you need to deal with something that's going on inside of you. So with that said, those are the signs. Let's move on to the sources. And so I had an interesting task because I want to make this as much Bible related as I possibly can, even though we're working through a book. I started thinking about what are some passages that could actually illustrate all of the internal sources of anxiety that Cuss lists in his book. And I immediately thought of this passage. So this is what we're going to read. John 21, verses 15 through 25. I'm going to read that now. This is the story of Peter being restored by Christ after Peter has denied Christ 3 times and Jesus is risen from the dead. This is their conversation together. Starting in verse 15. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Peter said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." Jesus said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." Jesus said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him a third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to Jesus, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." This he said to show by what kind of death Peter was to glorify God. And after saying this, Jesus said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who had been reclining at a table close to him, and had said, "Lord, who is it that's going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about this man?" Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." So the saying spread abroad among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who is bearing witness about these things, and whom has written these things. And we know that his testimony is true. Now there were also many other things that Jesus did, were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. This is God's word. So I've listed 6 of these Cuss lists in his book as sources of internal anxiety. Number 3, oaths, is from another chapter, and I'm integrating it here because it's a good place to talk about it. So let's work through this list. I'm going to explain it briefly, show you how it's illustrated in John 21, and we'll work through them and we'll be done. The hope for these is, I'll restate this at the end, but the way this has been helpful for me is these are little mental things that happen in us that half the time we don't realize we're doing. So once you have a category for it, it actually helps you to realize you're doing it, which helps you to then manage it. There you go. So number 1, recovering from mistakes. Mistakes cause anxiety. And when we talk about mistakes here, it could be sin. It could not be sin. It could just be a mistake. Like you made a mistake on the job. You made a mistake as a parent. You made a mistake as a spouse. And I'm not talking necessarily about massive mistakes like, you got a DUI and got into a wreck. We're talking about just the little mistakes that we all make throughout life. Little mistakes can cause us regret and confusion, which can lead to anxiety. Because you start asking questions like, why did I mess up? How did I mess up? Can I fix my mistake? How can I fix my mistake? What if I can't fix my mistake? What if it's impossible to fix my mistake? And then there you go, that's a tornado that starts happening in your mind. So Peter's the perfect example of this because he has denied Jesus 3 times. He's made a sinful mistake. And now he's standing face to face with the post-resurrection Jesus who's confronting him. So what does Peter need to be able to move past this mistake and go on with his life and in ministry, really, that Jesus has in store for him? Well, Cuss says in the book that the key to recovering from a mistake begins with noticing how you're dealing with it. He writes, quote, "Pay attention to how you react after you've made a mistake, and you'll uncover some sources of anxiety." We'll get to a list of different ways. So for Peter, it's pretty simple how he tried to recover from his mistake. He went to his other fishermen friends and he said, "Let's go fishing." He just was going to forget the old life with Jesus as the rock, as the disciple who was going to carry forth Jesus' message. He was just going to go back to his fishing boat and try to go back to life as was before he met Christ. Be surprised, I think about that, of how many people, after they make a big mistake, they just try to throw off their current life and go back to some former state of living as if that's going to make something better. All right, so Cuss says, notice things like this. How long does it take you to recover from a mistake? Do you punish yourself after a mistake? Do you wallow in guilt and shame after a mistake? Are you deeply bothered if someone else brings up the mistake that you made? Do you minimize the mistake? Do you try to justify the mistake? Do you blame other people? Do you try to garner sympathy? There's a thought exercise for you. Next time you mess up, ask yourself some of these questions. How long does it normally take me to recover from something like this? Am I blame shifting? Am I wallowing in guilt and shame? You can ask yourself questions like this, and it can help you work your way through managing mistakes, because Cuss argues that the key to recovering from a mistake and moving past the anxiety caused by it is learning to forgive yourself. So Jesus is walking Peter through that process in our passage. I don't think he's badgering Peter by continually saying, do you love me? He's not nagging him. He's not being like a nagging spouse. Instead, I think Jesus is trying to help Peter understand, I know what you did, but you actually do love me. And if you can remember that you actually love me, and that's what started this whole thing, then you'll be able to move on and accomplish the plan that I have for you in your life. Now, Peter comes to realization the third time Jesus asks him. I love what Peter says. He says, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And voila, Peter is acknowledging, yes, I have genuine love for you, and you know it. So after you've made a mistake, if it's a sin, you need to receive the forgiveness of God, first off. Then you need to let that assurance that God forgives you flow into you being able to actually forgive yourself. People say things like, I know God forgives me, but I can't forgive myself. And the response to that every time is, why are you better than God? How do you know better than God? And you have to preach that to yourself. If Peter had lived with guilt the rest of his life and said, I know Jesus forgives me, but I can't forgive myself, then he would not have been an effective leader. He would not have been effective in the ministry. He would not have accomplished. We wouldn't have him writing letters in the Bible and the like. He had to accept God's forgiveness, forgive himself, and move on. So that's number one, recovering from mistakes. How long does it take you? How does it manifest itself? How can you deal with it? Well, it's working on accepting God's forgiveness and then letting that flow into us, actually not holding those mistakes against ourselves and beating up for it. I know people who are still beating themselves up for stuff they did 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You can't do that. You're just going to live in anxiety. Now, here's another source of internal anxiety that I had never thought about until reading Cuss's book. He calls it the giants on your shoulders. This is the anxiety caused by feeling you've let someone down who's very important to you. The important person is the giant on your shoulder. So Cuss says, that old image of you got an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. You got people on your shoulders. He said, well, you really do, in a sense, have people on your shoulders, but they're the giants in your life. They're parents, they're your children, they're spouses, they're mentors, they're old professors. They're people in your life who you are thankful for and who you don't want to let down. You need to pay attention to who's on your shoulders. Whether it's your parents, a mentor, or even God himself, and you imagine them being disappointed with you when you make mistakes, let down when you make mistakes, it can cause further anxiety. And here's a quote from Cuss. He says, the giants on my shoulders are real people. I can name them today. But what made them giants is my imagination. The way I imagined them talking to me was harsh and dogmatic, and they expressed profound disappointment in me. In reality, those fine mentors may have been much more gracious and understanding than my imagination allowed, but that is what happens with the giants on our shoulders. They're no longer fully human. We make them two-dimensional, and they gain power over us. So notice when you're thinking about how you may have let someone down who is important to you, and do not allow that to cripple you from living a balanced, non-anxious life. Again, you take Peter. He let Jesus down. That was a giant on his shoulder. He could have thought about all the other apostles. He could have thought about his wife. Jesus is wanting him to just focus on what he's actually doing, not on this fantasy that Christ's going to be let down by him for the rest of his existence. So know who the giants on your shoulders are. If there's somebody today that you've got this nagging thing in your soul because you feel like you let somebody down, probably need to talk to that person And if you can't talk to them, you need to move on from it, because you cannot live your life like, oh, I let my dad down 20 years ago. I'll never be a good person. That's just a recipe for living in anxiety and sadness. All right, number 3, let's move on to oaths. This is very related. Cus emphasizes oaths made in childhood, but really oaths made at any time can cause anxiety when you feel like you're not fulfilling them. This is not something I've dealt with, but I've talked to people who say it's something when they've read this book, it was very helpful to them. So I wanted to make sure I got it into this chapter tonight. Like, you've made promises to yourself or to God or to other people. You feel like you failed those promises, let them down, and it's this nagging thing that just bothers you, and it comes up from time to time. So here's something to say to that. When I was in seminary, a friend of mine and I were studying the book of James together, and we were both amazed near the end of the book of James. After all the things James writes about how we're supposed to live, he says this is James 5:12. But above all, my brothers, do not swear an oath, either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath. So the joke about that was, of all the things James is talking about, the most important thing is don't swear an oath. Why is that important? Well, oaths are generally bad news. There are times we take marriage vows, we take church membership vows, but outside of those major things, there's hardly ever a reason to swear anything when you're dealing with people. Like, you don't need to swear to God in order for something to be true. You don't need to make some oath, I'm going to accomplish this, or I'm a worthless human being, or I'm accursed or something. So to give you an example of how this can work itself out, I was once trying to share the gospel with a non-believer. He was an older man. And the person actually told me he couldn't believe in God because when his father was dying on his deathbed, he made some kind of agreement with God where he said, God, if you let my dad live, I will believe in you. If you don't, I won't. And his dad died. So that little agreement he made with God made him then the rest of his life believe there is no God. It makes absolutely no sense, but it's silly, the oaths we can make and bind ourselves to that can cripple us in our lives. I mean, you make an oath that you're going to, I met a Christian man one time who said he made an oath he was going to be a millionaire by the time he was 30. And he did, he became a millionaire. But who cares whether he did or whether he didn't? It was stupid. You could set goals. You don't have to make binding oaths upon yourselves. Stop making oaths to yourself and stop making oaths to God. It's like, if you have a goal, set it. Try to do it. If you fail, you failed. Just move on from it. Like, trying to hang on to promises you made years ago to yourself or to God are a recipe for continued anxiety, to live in anxiety for the rest of your life. Peter had sworn to Jesus. When Jesus said, I'm going to die, Peter said, heaven forbid, you're not going to die. I will die before you die. And of course, that's not what happened. Peter broke his promise to Jesus. He ended up cowering and running away and denying Christ 3 times. Peter was scared of a little girl who questioned whether he knew Jesus. That could have crippled Peter the rest of his life. I broke my oath. I broke my promise to Jesus. I'm unworthy to be an apostle. I'm unworthy to be a Christian. Could have ruined his life. That's why Jesus is restoring him. He's showing him that that's not true. It doesn't matter what you promised. What matters is what I promised. And of course, Christ promises to save and then ultimately to use Peter going forward, even on the back end of Peter's mistake. All right, so that's number 3, oaths. Number 4 is blind spot. He calls it blind spot knowledge and feeling exposed. That's what Cuss calls it. This is when you come to a realization about yourself that you had previously been blind to. This can be a major anxiety trigger. Maybe it's a realization of something you did in the past that hurt someone else and you didn't know it for a time. Maybe it's the realization of a flaw that you didn't know you had and it gets pointed out to you. Maybe it's the realization of a weakness. Maybe it's a realization that you were capable of doing something very bad you didn't realize you were capable of. And so when you do it, it totally makes you start to question yourself, your self-image, your character, who you are. Again, Peter's self-image, I think to me, was really clear. He was brash and bold and willing to die, but he got exposed as a coward. His blind spot of his own cowardice got exposed. And so Peter's vulnerable, and he can't put on any bravado, false bravado, in front of Christ now. He's been exposed. And so the answer to this, when you get exposed to a blind spot, is, well, A, how do you respond to it? Well, the response to it is, try to do better, yeah, but not in a crippling sort of way where it's like, oh, a flaw got exposed, now I have to totally change my life. No, just deal honestly with the flaw or the weakness or the blind spot and then try to move on. Don't let it be something that nags you for the rest of your life. You know, you acted like you lost your temper and acted like you're an idiot in front of your kids and you think they'll never ever look at you the same. Don't let that affect you 5 years from now. It's like, apologize to the kids. Say, I showed you a side of Daddy that I didn't want you to see, that maybe I didn't even know was there, but it's there. And I'm sorry, and I'll try my best not to do it again. And then you move on. That's the way it works if you don't want to live in anxiety. Fifth, this is a really interesting one. It's an eye-opener for me. Judgment and values violation as an internal trigger of anxiety. There are two parts to this. The first part is the judgment part. You being anxious because you're judging other people. And then the second part is you being anxious because another person violates your values. These two kind of go together, but not always. So this looks like this. Somebody does something. Maybe it violates your personal values. You would think it's wrong. You wouldn't have done that. Or maybe they just did something in general that you're judging them about. And so you start saying things like, can you believe so-and-so did that? That was offensive. I wonder if they know how offensive that was. I wonder if they even care how offensive that was. I wonder if they even know it was offensive at all. But I can't believe they did that. That's anxiety that you're allowing someone else to put inside of you. Cuss says when that happens, you need to be aware of what other people do that offends you or what causes you to judge them, because that may teach you a lot about yourself and allow you to deal with some of your own stuff. Example of that I experienced, I've told stories. We had a gentleman, the first church I was a member of, decades ago. We had a man who was on a crusade to get rid of televisions. And this is pre-internet, very, very early internet, early 2000s. And so he was preaching if he was here tonight, he would have been, whatever table he was at, he'd have been saying, do you have a television? You need to get rid of your television. Television's evil. He called them the sewer line of Satan, pumping up stuff straight from hell. And we had a conversation, a group of guys one time, like, why are you so against television? What's your problem with television? And it came down to, he found that television was a big temptation for him, that when he had one, he would watch stuff he wasn't supposed to watch. Well, hello, that's your problem. You can't just go around judging everybody else because you think they might be falling into the same temptation that you are. Deal with your own stuff and stop spreading your anxiety to everybody else. That's fine. Who cares? I don't care. You can get rid of your smartphone, your TV, your computer, your internet. I don't care. I won't judge you at all. But you can't just tell other people how to live because that particular thing bothers you. So it doesn't mean there's never reasons for us to judge people. I mean, that's obvious. Jesus says, judge not lest you be judged. And then right after that, he says, don't cast your pearl before swines. So we got to be able to recognize a swine when we see a swine. That is a form of judgment. But Jesus is warning against being nitpicky. And he's saying you're going to be judged with the same judgment. So I think, anyway, that's a good reason for you, when you feel yourself being judgmental, to ask yourself, what is this person doing that bothers me? And does it reflect something in myself? Like if I meet somebody and I think that person comes across as really arrogant, and I start judging, and that bothers me. I wonder if they even realize how arrogant they are. I need to look at myself and say, maybe I'm pretty prideful and arrogant myself, and meeting somebody who's up there on that level just offends me. That's the point. Let me get back to my notes. This is a quote. He says, sometimes we don't even know what we value until someone violates it and we find ourselves unreasonably angry in response. So if you don't want to live in anxiety, this is the end of the quote, you can't walk around being offended all the time. And again, I keep saying, go back to the passage, it's really easy. Jesus could have been berating Peter. He's loving Peter. He's trying to restore Peter, not judge Peter. If anybody wanted to walk around offended 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it was Jesus. Because everything we do is probably offensive to him in some form or another, but he's gracious. So he does not live offended with us. He forgives. All right, so we will get offended from time to time. It will cause us anxiety, but we can choose not to live offended, not to live an offended lifestyle where we're always offended, always outraged. The younger folks are now always clutching our pearls. You probably know people like that. Everything you see is offensive. It's not worth living that way. All right, next is another fun one. We got two more. Anger fantasies and the need for an enemy. I'm not going to take a poll, but I wonder how many of you had an anger fantasy in the last week. Boy, what if I could just get them in a room and whether it's verbal berating or physical, just wish I could punch them in the nose. Cuss writes, so imagine you're driving down the road, picturing a conversation or fight with another person, usually someone who has emailed you or made a painful comment in a meeting. He's talking to leaders. It could be anything. Or someone who has a history of causing you pain. As you plan it out in your mind, you're not only defending yourself, you're unloading on that person. And at the end of the anger fantasy, the person apologizes, sees the error of his or her ways, and declares that you are indeed justified and that he or she is indeed wrong. And then Cuss says, yeah, I've never had that happen either. It happens all the time. That's the point. He says anger fantasies are insidious because they feel so good, but they are dangerous. They are self-righteousness at its deadliest because you can indulge in it without ever having to really engage the person. Anger fantasies do nothing but feed anxiety. If you are having them, then you haven't processed your anger and you're going to keep living in anxiety and you need to deal with it. And I'm telling you, I was telling Matt about this in the office, just about some of these points. And he mentioned in his reading on trauma recently that there are actually three kinds of fantasies that psychiatrists say are bad. Not just anger fantasies. There's also, this is off the top of my head, let me remember. Anger is one. Another one was forgiveness. I can't think of the middle one. But even forgiveness fantasies, where you're reuniting with this person who you've had hostility with, and you can see it happening in your mind, and they're apologizing to you, and you're apologizing to them. If you're not going to do something, it's just worthless. You're making up a movie in your mind that you're wasting your time on getting lost in. So the second part of this equation, so anger fantasies, is the need for an enemy, as Cuss says. The reason we have these fantasies is because sometimes we think in order to exist, we have to have an enemy. We have to have someone or something we're fighting against, and we can put ourselves over and against that someone or something as the hero so that I can make myself feel better. I've got to be the hero, and so I've got to concoct for myself an enemy. Here's some news. We have an enemy. His name's Satan. He's real. You've always got an enemy. You don't need to make up new ones. And it's like maybe there is somebody who legitimately is an enemy to you. Okay, that's a reality. But the point in this is, Cuss wants to say, you can spend a lot of time in unnecessary anxiety by having fist fights in your brain when there's nothing going on outside of you that should be causing you to be anxious. And so deal with it. Again, I keep trying to go back to Peter to give the example. What does Peter do after Jesus? Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Peter goes, what about that guy? What about John? What about the Apostle John? What about him? What's going to happen to him? You just told me I'm going to die. What about it? He's setting up one of the other apostles basically over and against himself. Well, himself over and against him, saying, well, that's not fair. What's going to happen to this guy? And you know what Jesus' answer was to that? Do you remember? What does that have to do with you? You follow me. You worry about your path. You worry about your mission. I've got a mission for him. Chronicles of Narnia, one of my favorite lines. Aslan only tells you your own story. Don't spend so much time worrying about other people or concocting enemies. It'll save you a lot of anxiety. I will tell this story. I think I've told it once before, but just give you an example of this. How I'm the world's worst for anger fantasies, the world's worst. And I had an incident happen years ago in my first pastorate. A man did something I mean, it offended me as bad as I've ever been offended in my life. And I was dreaming about the man, like getting in fights with the man. And I had a very vivid dream one night where the man and I were in the sanctuary of the church in a fist fight. And I got behind him and put him in a rear naked chokehold. I watched a lot of MMA back in those days. And I took joy as I felt him go limp. I'd knock him out, choked him out. And went down to the floor. I got up and I looked down, and my daughter Eden was laying on the floor in the dream. I'm being vulnerable here. But the lesson, I'm not an interpreter of dreams. I'm not Joseph. But the interpretation I took of that dream was, your anger is not ever going to do anything to that man, but it's going to hurt your family. And I resolved that day, I'm moving on. I cannot live in anger with this. And I did. I just moved on. I'm just like, okay, I just can't be angry at him anymore. I'm not going to think about him. I'm not going to give him time in my mind. And I did. And anyway, but it comes to mind as a vivid example. Don't live in anger fantasies. It does you no good. It just who wants to be at war on the inside? And finally, let's wrap up with doubt. Cuss breaks that down into two parts: doubt in your own ability and doubt in God. Doubt in your own ability. And we all have not we all. A lot of people, I've struggled with this, have a form of imposter syndrome, as they call it. Like, you don't feel like you're worthy of all the things that you got. Like that Chris Christopherson song, "Why me, Lord? What have I ever done to deserve even one of the pleasures I've known?" We live by grace. Just accept grace and don't run around walking like, I don't deserve this. I'm a miserable human being. Yeah, we're wretches. We're sinners. We believe that. You don't have to walk around with that in your posture. You're a child of the King. He loves you. He's forgiven you. You don't have to walk around in doubt. You don't have to doubt God's love for you. If Jesus could love Peter, he can love us. And he does. And you don't have to walk around doubting your own ability. I mean, it's okay to question yourself from time to time and say, I don't know if I'm up for this task. And if you're not, just admit it. And move on, do something else. And if you fail, just admit you failed. Move on, do something else. Just don't walk around constantly in self-doubt. It's nothing but a recipe for anxiety. And doubting God as well. I mean, he loves you. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, can I say it? If you trust Christ, if you rest in him for your salvation, he loves you, sealed deal. It's not about your oaths and promises. It's his oath and promise. He loves you. Let me wrap up. Cuss ends the chapter by saying he gave his list of internal sources of anxiety that we started with so that you can learn to name them when they strike. When that physically happens to you, the spinning mind, the racing heart, the tightening body, you know you're anxious. So start asking yourself, what's the source? And don't be shocked if it's one of these 7. There are more. Obviously, there are more. It's different for everyone. And again, we're not talking about external stimulus. But internally, you can ask yourself, could it be one of these 7? And if so, how do I deal with it? This is Cuss's quote. He says, knowing and naming your sources does not eliminate anxiety, but it reduces the plaguing power anxiety has on your life. For those whose anxiety sources are connected to trauma or abuse, I encourage you to process with a trusted professional, and I second that. But for the common internal sources, try to simply start naming them and reminding yourself that Jesus loves you. It's a very simple thing, but it can go a long, long way. He didn't give up on Peter. He's not going to give up on us. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your grace to us tonight. We all have different triggers that cause us to anxiety to take over us on the inside and manifest on the outside. Would you help us to learn to name those triggers so that we can better manage them? And again, we talked about this weeks ago. The ultimate goal of this is that we can have a clearer view of you and what you're doing so that we can live more clearly into your purpose and plan for our lives without being wrecked by what's going on and wrecked by what's going on the inside of us. So help us to do these things, we ask in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you all. God bless. Good evening.